Welcome to the JGF Fellowship Annual Summit. Together, we are empowered. Together, we are the architects of a brighter tomorrow.
Please welcome onto stage for the panel discussion, Zimkhitha Peter, Crystal Polski, Malcolm Mooi, and your moderator, Boitumelo Diale.
Good afternoon and welcome to the very first panel discussion at JGF's 7th Annual National Summit. My name is Boitumelo Diale, proudly represent the Boitumelo Diale brand, fondly known as BDB. I am a JGF alumni. Yes, I have earned the blue blazer. I sit on the JGF Alumni Executive Committee as the engagement coordinator. I am very passionate about education. I am a qualified teacher. My teaching subjects are accounting and economics. Currently, I lecture at the University of Cape Town, and it gives me great pleasure and delight to be here as your panel moderator. Of course, I'm not alone today. I am with my accomplished and amazing panelists who are here to shed some light on a very important topic, and they are Malcolm Mooi, who is an EdTech Entrepreneur and the founder of Dr. C.L. Smith Foundation and Zibuza.net. Crystal Polski, who is a technology integration specialist at Hopkins Public Schools District in the United States of America. And last but not least, Zimkhitha Peter, who is the CEO of Allan and Gill Philanthropies, South Africa. Today's panel is being empowered to navigate challenges in the face of driving change in South Africa and similar contexts. We will be looking at strategies that have worked, lessons that have been learned, and also exploring some innovative solutions that can be implemented to solve some of the most pressing challenges that we're currently facing in our country. I would love to start off with our favorite JGF question, highlights the importance of teachers in South Africa and globally. Panelists, I would love to find out from each and every one of you, starting with Malcolm Mooi, followed by Crystal Polski, and ending up with Zimkhitha. Who is your favorite teacher and why?
Good afternoon, everybody. Such a privilege to be here with you. My favorite teacher was Mr. Sharp, high school English teacher. Why? Well, this man really gave me nightmares during school, just in terms of how eloquently he used the language and how insistent he was. And he even mocked me sometimes with my accent. But looking back now, all these years later, I'm actually quite grateful for him and what he did in terms of pushing me. And in fact, I'm proud to say I'm now an author of one book and 5 kiddies books. And I think when I look back, it was definitely that influence and how he pushed me that makes him my favorite teacher.
Over to you, Crystal Polski.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be back in South Africa. I was there in 2019, and if anyone was at the Access Summit, I met a lot of JGF Fellows in 2019, and my favorite teacher, I'm going to a number of them, but one of them just passed recently. He was my history professor in undergraduate school and really taught me how to think historically and to think about the context of the time period, but then also try to make connections and comparisons to today. And he continued to keep relationships with lots of his students and checked in on us and was always such a champion for me becoming a history and social studies teacher.
Hello, everybody. My name is Zimkhitha Peter. It's incredible to be here and to meet all of the fellow panelists. I think my favorite teacher, it's hard to pick one, but I'm picking, I had a professor at First State University of Chemistry, and he really instilled the love for learning, more than just the love for getting grades. And he would often make an example that always stuck with me of a student who went to a sensei master, and the sensei master asked, "What do you want?" He says, "I want a black belt." And the sensei master went to the drawer, took out a black belt and gave it to him and said, "There's your black belt." And it always illustrated that what he actually wanted was the skills of how to do karate not just the attainment of a black belt. And he used that analogy to help us understand that we're not just there to gain a mark or a point, but to really fall in love with the subject and chemistry. And so, thank you. Great.
Thank you so much for those responses. Listening to the responses that have been shared, it really reaffirms the fact that teachers are change makers. The role that they play in the lives of students is very crucial. Now, Malcolm, when you responded to the very first question, you touched a bit on who you are. I would like to find out from you, Malcolm. I know that you are a visionary creator of an online community platform. Please tell us a bit more about yourself and the work that you do.
Thank you. I'm a computer systems by qualification engineer, and I've spent many years in corporate as well. And in about 2009, I left corporate to pursue my own interests. I wish I could say it was a motivational or inspirational story. But to be honest with you, I had a fallout with management at my company at the time. I was also in a long distance relationship. So I figured if I were to be my own boss, I could own my time and travel. And as a computer systems engineer, I worked across multiple sectors, solving solutions in manufacturing, finance sector. I even built a system for the courts. And so I think I was well groomed in terms of having access to a global intranet and support system that allowed me to go out and kind of build these solutions. And it was interesting once I broke away from corporate, because I realized that, who was I? Before as a corporate, I had a business card, and when I gave it over, that brand alone kind of opened up doors and vetted me as somebody that you could trust. But on my own, I had no brand. And so it really made me conscious in terms of who I needed to become in order for people to trust me. And it's been a very interesting journey, very counterintuitive in terms of what we experience day to day and how we've been conditioned through schooling. Some of the lessons I've taken away from there is, in schooling, we taught something and then we have a test and you pass or you fail. In entrepreneurship, you're constantly failing and you're failing forward. And that's very counterintuitive in terms of, how do you sustain that over a long period of time? So you literally have to reprogram yourself to be able to cope with that. So I wasn't always in education. I initially started my first venture in the energy sector. And that was kind of like a 5-year process where I really learned about how can I apply technology within something to solve a solution. But what was interesting there, I broke away from that kind of engineering mindset to see beyond that in terms of, in order for us to build that solution, there was a finance aspect to it. So I learned about structured financing. And that was very interesting in terms of unlocking opportunities. And then the final one for me, especially in that energy sector, was the impact we could have had. So with everything, if we delivered it, it meant that people would get access to electricity. And this was 2003. So people were still living by candlelight and paraffin. So that was major for me in terms of like a flow of, I can use technology to solve problems, but I need financing to make it happen. And I could have an impact on somebody's life. That venture failed. It did happen, just not with me. So I think the lesson I learned there, the deal value at that point was 1.4 billion rand. And it served me as an entrepreneur because, when you lose something that big, any other loss that comes after that is insignificant, because I always benchmark it against that, And then I needed to make a choice. Do I go back to the comforts of corporate, or do I pursue my life as an entrepreneur? I chose the latter. I'm glad I did. And found myself in the education sector. What was great about that is I used the same lessons I had learned from a previous experience in the energy sector and started to apply that same philosophy inside at the education sector, but much better forward. So this was around the Limpopo textbook crisis time. So I thought, hey, let me digitize textbooks, give every kid a tablet, and I'm going to solve that problem. But to be honest with you, when I started engaging with the sector, the big problem I saw, which I think is still prevalent today, is that there's no culture of sharing and collaboration within the sector. And I thought, based on my experiences at the corporate multinational, where I had access to a global intranet, the support system and experts, if I could create that locally, and give teachers access to that intranet of sorts, then we could get that culture of sharing and collaboration going. And it's been 8 years later, we've learned so many lessons for it. But essentially, yes, as a community engagement platform, we are looking at the ecosystem and saying, how do we, one, connect people? Because if you think about it, and this is something else just to share with you, from a technology progression perspective, a lot of people think technology is the silver bullet that answers all our problems. It's not. It's a tool, and if we use the tool correctly, then we can unlock opportunities, right? So bear that in mind. The next point was then kind of when we connect people, what does it enable? So when I looked at teaching, I was kind of like, okay, teachers work in isolation, they're subjected to all these difficult things, and how do we create the space virtually for them? What we soon realized that teachers weren't comfortable in these environments. There was a technophobia around using technology. Bear in mind, this is like 2012. They were also very critical of each other. We didn't like receiving criticism from the outside, but there was very much politics in terms of like, I don't want to work with this person because of this and that reason. And so we were stuck. And I think, in this world that's constantly changing, we needed to look at, how do we empower these teachers? And I think that was also very interesting. And for me, when I look at empowerment, I look at it like, how do you give somebody access to the knowledge? How do you help build their confidence? How do you create the means for them to be able to do all of these things? And then, once you have that ability to do things and make decisions for oneself, then you truly empower somebody. And, when you empower somebody, then that allows other people to also see being led by example. And then if we can grow enough people, so my formula is, if you can empower an individual, you can uplift the community. And if you uplift the community, then you can transform lives. And that's the formula we apply, obviously using technology across that. And so over the years, we've kind of we started off with teachers. We noticed that wasn't working. We then adapted and looked at, who were the other players in the ecosystem. That was then organizations. Started working with them in terms of giving access to resources, etc. And then in 2020, COVID happened, and our community grew from 10,000 members nationally in South Africa to 23,000 members. So it took us 4 years to get 10,000 members, and it took us 10 months to get to 23,000 members. So when somebody says, what's your success? I'm like, COVID was my success, because people were forced to embrace technology for the first time. We were preaching for a good 6 years, technology is the way to go. And nobody listened until COVID came along. So that was a big breakthrough. But then we had another problem. We had all these learners coming in. We had parents coming in. So we needed to really think about and understand it, to the intimate detail of there's politics between teachers and parents, because if parents are in teacher space, then teachers are not comfortable, so they don't participate and contribute. And we're working with learners, so you're dealing with underage kids. So how do we safeguard these guys? And so really just giving a lot of thought into that, and again, applying technology to it and creating role-based access and privileges. And so, we've grown the community. We currently just passed 35,000 members. So when we think about empowerment, it's kind of like the full circle.
Thank you so much. What I'm getting from your story is that spirit of tenacity is going to get us further than we think. And what's also coming through is courageous collaboration. They say that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to go together. And what's interesting is that I'm sure Zimkhitha, as she's listening to you, she's just like, these are one of the people I work with every single day, because she deals with entrepreneurs. And so I would like you to step in here. I know that you've got extensive experience in youth development as well as entrepreneurship education. When you see people like Malcolm, does this remind you of why you did what you did? Can you please just shed some light on what inspired you to do the work that you do, and also to lead such a big organization that is the Allan and Gill Philanthropies of South Africa, that is really, really making change and helping different organizations globally? So Zim, we'd like to hear from you, please.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Malcolm. It was really incredible to hear your story. Probably organize coffee sometime. I think personally, before even, I usually tell people, I think I was about 11 years of age when I knew what I wanted to do. Of course, I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know what to study for it. But South Africa, we always talk about it being a tale of two cities, where we live in the same country, but we're experiencing the same country totally different. And it's evident when it comes to the health sector, and it's more evident even when it comes to our education system. So I got to live on the other side of this education system. And I think I was 11 years old, and I think around the age of 13, someone came and just gave me, just an individual gave me an opportunity to go and study outside of my community. And I think that seed of powerful potential. And fast forward a few years later, or many years after that, I had an opportunity to join the Allan and Gill Philanthropies. At the time, I joined the Ellen Gray Orbis Foundation, really captured by this amazing vision of Mr. Allan Gray that said in the coming years there will emerge a new generation of entrepreneurial leaders, people of passion, of change that will pioneer in terms of their innovation, and many more will follow in their footsteps, and they'll make a community. So he really believed, firstly, just in the power of an individual, and that if you take any person that has got great potential, and that potential is supported, and that potential is nurtured for a long time, that if you nurture people's potential, I think our earlier speaker was talking about elite athletes, and we know that most of the times they are picked early, then they are nurtured for the long term. And you also recognize the value of education, in attacking our triple evils of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, and understood that if we want to have even entrepreneurs that will create those jobs, but in order for us to have those entrepreneurs as a base, they need to have access to quality education. So I've always sort of been inspired by this vision of being part of this group that believes, firstly, that we all can at least do something regarding the injustices that people are exposed to every day, and that if we do pick people at a very young age and support them for the long term, and cultivate an entrepreneurial mindset and an entrepreneurial spirit, which is really about problem solving, which is really about bringing new ideas to life, which is really about creativity and collaboration. And that we are able, like as Malcolm was talking, to say, if you see a problem, how can I solve this problem? How can I contribute to this problem? And look at problems as opportunities. And if we look at our education system, there are many problems. And therefore, it means we shouldn't, there are many, many problems. So there will never be a lack of opportunity for people that think entrepreneurially. There'll never be a lack of opportunity for teachers that think entrepreneurially. And I'm privileged to be part of an organization of AGGP SA, including JGF, that says our role is how do we nurture, how do we support you guys, the people that looks at the society and looks at the problems that are in society and say, but I've got a spark of something, of thinking things can be different. Everything we see, we touch and experience started as an idea, and that your ideas matter, that the things that bug you about our country, those things matter. And that if you come together, if you collaborate, if you have that within this nurturing environment, within the support of learning from those that have gone before you, within and trusting yourself in terms of as a community, that even JGF exists to support those dreams, to back those dreams, because we know that those are not selfish dreams. Those are dreams to say, if I can make this platform come alive, if I can make this book come alive, it can bring this idea come alive, it will have an impact on someone's life, and therefore will have a ripple effect. Yeah, so really passionate about entrepreneurship, not just as a tool of making money. There's nothing bad with that, but more at the bottom of it is about creating change and creating lasting change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zim. As you're speaking, I'm reminded of the fact that, JGF is vision in action. I'm sure the program participants, as you are listening from wherever you are in the comfort of your own homes, you are reminded of the vision of JGF. One of the things Zim mentioned is that we need teachers who want to become entrepreneurs, and JGF is really nurturing not just high impact educators, but also educational leaders and social entrepreneurs. So thank you for reminding us of why we're here and why this was started in the first place, Zim. Now, Crystal, Malcolm touched on technology. Zim touched on the importance of entrepreneurs who will use technology and other resources to impact change. I know that you're a technology integration specialist, but for our audience, can you please explain to us what it means to be a tech integration specialist, and what does your everyday work life look like, and what inspired you to actually venture into this space?
Thank you. And so wonderful to hear Zim and Malcolm's story and to hear so many similarities between South Africa and the United States. We very much have sort of two systems, and depending upon where you go to school can really impact your outcomes. And my role as a technology integration specialist, I work with teachers and students to help teachers see that students are ready to do the things that we want them to do, to be more creative and transformative in the types of learning experiences, and to try to support the teachers to be able to do that work in the classrooms. And so, like Malcolm, I help manage a learning management system, but we use a learning management system called Canvas, and I help teachers figure out how they're going to deliver their lessons, how they're going to deliver their lessons in a different way than they would with traditional paper and pencil. So making sure they're like maximizing all of the different features within the system. And a lot of that, adults, especially adults that have been in the system a long time, are resistant to change. And so trying to find ways and create communities of collaboration, and lots of opportunities for reflection. Like once they've tried something, to go back to them and have the conversation, or to do it with them, to teach it with them so that it feels more comfortable, to reflect on like what went well and how do I want to use this practice going forward. We've also been we have students that speak like 30 different languages in our school district. And we try to, especially with the languages that are spoken most frequently, make sure that materials are translated into those languages to make sure caregivers have an understanding of what's happening in schools, and really try to see caregivers as partners in the education process.
So basically, if I understood you correctly, what you do is you help schools, teachers, learners, and all stakeholders to bring in technology and to use that to deliver the material that's being learned at the school. Is that correct?
Yes.
This is me now trying
to make sure that that we're not just using technology for technology's sake, because there is a time and a place to not use technology too. Especially as like children are on screens more and more, we also want to find ways to build community that are low tech and high tech. And so really thinking about, when is it purposeful to use technology in the learning space, and when is it purposeful for us to really be making those face-to-face, in-person connections. That is why I love education, and part of why I became a teacher is because of that community feeling.
Thank you, Crystal. Malcolm, you touched briefly on some of the challenges that you encountered with your other business ventures. I'm interested in finding out, what is the one major problem or challenge that you have encountered with ZibuzaNet, your online community platform? Please maybe let us know what this problem is, and have you taken any measures to solve it? If not, what are those?
Thank you. Building on what Zimkhitha said earlier on, like if you look at the context of South Africa, and I think globally, we live in a world that's very like unequal, right? So for me, if I look at what my vision and my aspirations and my purpose is how do I create a more inclusive and equitable education system? And that's based on South Africa's history as well. So for me, my biggest challenge I have every day is this battle between commercial sustainability and profitability, which is the business side of things, and then the impact. So, how do I not exclude people, because then it's going against the values. So for us, we've had to push ourselves beyond kind of normal business as usual engagements, in terms of saying, look, we understand in South Africa, most people cannot afford to pay for the services that we want to offer, and we don't want to take away from the quality of the services, right? So we offer premium products and services. But at the same time, we know that if we were to charge for it, then we're excluding the very people and impact we want to have. Now, if you look at some of the numbers that we look into, so in South Africa, there's 24,500 schools. Of that, there's about 2,000 independent private schools that have the means, but the majority of schools don't have access, right? They're under-resourced, previously disadvantaged. So for us, it's like, I could make money and sustain myself in the private sector, but then I wouldn't have any impact in public sector and in our nation. So we focus on public sector, and then we need to figure out ways in terms of how do we subsidize or find sponsors to match beneficiaries. And And so you're managing two things. One, you're managing your beneficiaries, but also your clients, and the two are not the same, and they're looking for two very different things. So I think my biggest challenge is that balancing act.
Thank you, Malcolm. Zim, I would like to find out from you. So as I mentioned earlier, JGF is Vision in Action, and this is one of the programs that is supported by the Allan and Gill Philanthropy. How do you ensure that the educational programs that you guys implement are sustainable, both in terms of finances and impact?
Right, so I think maybe the first one around finances, I won't lie. Firstly, we've been incredibly privileged. We do sit in a privileged position of being beneficiaries of Mr. Gray's generosity. And I was talking at a philanthropy conference the other day, and I was noting that all philanthropists are entrepreneurs that find a way, not just giving back, but investing in society. So we are all, one way or the other, beneficiaries of someone's generosity. And not only have we benefited from financial resources, but we've also benefited from learning from other organizations and other people that have been in the space. Because sometimes in doing this work, it's more than financial resources that you need. I'm often humbled by organizations that are able to do so much more with little financial resources, but we've learned so much in terms of skills and knowledge, and that they've been generous to share in the sector. And one of the ways to really ensure sustainability of our sector and sustainability of the impact we want to do is the power of generosity, how little the resources that one might have. And so that's basically the first one. And the second one is that we have to think, I do believe that the social problems that we're trying to solve, even in education and otherwise, are the most complex and the most difficult. And I think it's been unfortunate that sometimes in the nonprofit sector, we take probably the best brains and we put them in corporate sector, and we don't do the same. That's why I'm incredibly excited by the JGF, even in terms of when it started. The idea was we are going to get the best of the best into the classrooms, so that teaching is never seen as that if you can't do anything else or the marks are too low or any of that, but then this is the pathway. Because educating and standing in front of and shaping someone's future, it cannot be a profession of last resort. It has to have the best of the best people standing in front of those classrooms. And secondly, to be very intentional that we give the best support. Even the team behind JGF, it's an incredible team behind it, because this thing is so important. Then thirdly, you have to apply sound business principles. And I think Malcolm was talking about that. Even if the problems are so many, the resources are so constrained, you have to bring innovation. So we make sure that in most of our programs that we run, we are collaborative. We work with people in the sector. We ensure that we can crowd in resources, both financial resources and non-financial resources, that we can crowd in resources. So all of that, you do need that thing of collective impact. You do need innovation to be able to think through, how can I impact many through the limited resources that I have? And I think Malcolm touched on that, and technology is one of the ways, but there are many other various ways of being able to do this. And I think sustainability, you ensure it firstly by being very clear about the problem you're trying to solve. If you are trying to sustain your program and the mechanisms of how you do your program, you're probably not going to last too long. But if you are trying to say, I'm married to the problem, I'm very clear about the problem I'm trying to solve. Therefore, it means you can always be adaptable in your pathways, be adaptable in how you begin to solve it, even when your resources gets constrained. But if you are trying to be married to a program and a particular methodology of doing that, then the problem is that you won't be too sustainable. And I think it takes that. It takes generosity. It takes true collaboration. It takes innovation. It takes being married to the problem you're trying to solve, not your solution, and also being able to rise back from those setbacks. And it takes disciplined thought in really applying sound business principles, even in the non-sector or even something that you call a non-profit. Apply sound business principles and sound business models that allow you to be sustainable.
Something that's coming through very strongly for me personally is when your why is clear, the how becomes easy. Like once you know your why and you're married to the problem, the how becomes very easy. Not that the journey will be without its problems, but you then are, committed to the cause. And another thing that's coming through as I'm listening to all three panelists is something that Malcolm shared earlier that I'm thinking about. As Zim was speaking, the concept of Ubuntu comes through. Some of us are, because JGF is. So the spirit of humanity is a big thing. And another thing that's coming through here is you inspire an individual, you uplifting communities and transforming lives. And I think if the why is clear, if you're married to the problem, if you don't deviate from the cause as Zim is advising here, then there will be sustainability in the long run. I'm seeing a question from Danielle Mohoma. It says, what were specific resources that were provided to counteract challenges among teachers or within school? Directed to Malcolm. Malcolm, may you please step in and respond to that question, please? Thank you.
If I were to understand the question correctly, the use case I would love to give is one on literacy. So if we look in South Africa, the challenges we face with literacy is quite scary. If you look at the Pearl study, we actually have regressed from, I think, 78 to 81% of kids in grade 4 that cannot read with comprehension in any language. And so when we looked at unpacking that in terms of saying how could we empower educators to solve this literacy problem, again, we looked at the ecosystem, and in that spirit of Ubuntu, we looked and said, well, if we were to solve this, what are some of the challenges that teachers face? One was access to books. And so we realized that, if we went with physical books, we couldn't distribute enough in terms of the cost. So we looked to partner with a local publisher, QualiBooks. They had a solution with ebooks, and that would allow us to basically then flip the model, right? So that virtual library facility came with 2,500 books for ages 3 to 15 across multiple learning categories and in all official languages, so all 11 official languages. So we had the library, and because QualiBooks is for profit and they were charging for this premium service, we knew that most people would not be able to pay the subscription to access that. And so we then went out and worked with corporate South Africa. Hollard came to the table, and they sponsored 2,000 users for 1 year to get access to the library. And the library works a bit differently. So you're not paying per book, you're paying a subscription, and it's a Netflix model where you can basically access everything unlimitedly. What I loved about this also, it's data driven. So as a sponsor, you're looking for your return on investment and impact and reach. And so at the end of the day, what we did to empower teachers is give them access to a library facility where there was no cost. And essentially what we did from a reporting perspective, we were able to show how many books were read, when were they read, what type of books, our kids reading during school, after school. And it was quite interesting, the data that came out of that. So I think, in terms of how we provided teachers with resources, that was one of the ways that I would say we made resources accessible that help teachers for a very important aspect of learning.
Thank you, Malcolm. Okay, Aaron Hines, thank you so much for asking your question. Let's please project it on the screen, but I'll read it in the meantime. It says, we've been hearing about unequal access to education and how this is not just a South African issue. How have you managed to integrate digital technology into education while facing limited access to things like Wi-Fi, digital devices, etc.? And that question is for Crystal Polski.
Hi, Aaron. Great question. So a couple of things. During the pandemic, a lot of companies, I'm sure it was similar in South Africa, that they were more willing to give some things during the pandemic because of access. And the challenge has been, how do we keep that access going, even though just because the pandemic is lessened and we don't have as much of we have in-person schooling, we still need access to Wi-Fi and things like hotspots at home. And so we do have a partnership with our local internet company that families can get a hotspot. And this also is generally means that they might need other resources too. So we are a community school and offer a food market and access to healthcare and things like that co-located within our school. And so sometimes the Wi-Fi situation can bring about deeper conversations about other needs that the families are having. But we do check out hotspots to families that are needing them. And we also try to limit the amount of outside work. We really want children to be children when they're not in school, and to be able to play and do things that are off of screens. So it is about that balance, but we do offer hotspots for families to check out. And we do have one-to-one devices where children do take their devices home. That is an important part of our technology ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Thank you so much for that. Zim, I would also just want to know and find out, how do you ensure that your efforts as a company reach the marginalized and the vulnerable populations? How do you make sure that those who we don't often hear or see are seen and heard?
I think once again, it's just when I said earlier, is we are incredibly clear about the problem that we want to solve and who we want to solve it for. But we understand that we're going to achieve that impact through organizations that we work with. Either we start and incubate, or we give grant funding to existing organizations. So really, it is about picking the organizations that are already working or solving the problems that you'd want solved. So, and also working with those organizations and co-creating that vision, or being very collaborative about what is it that you expect as impact in terms of those particular organizations. And also you find that there are passionate people behind them. There are people that are really are trying to solve problems. So we've got a range of support we give to people that are working with people in the informal sector, that are in the informal economy. You've mentioned we supporting organizations that are supporting children to read for meaning, calculate with confidence by the age of 10, that are working in the low-fee schools in South Africa. We also, we support a program that's working with artisans as well, plumbers and electricians, to be able to start. So really, it is about finding either the right people or the right organizations that are actually already, because we usually say that the word philanthropy means love for humanity, and the entire idea behind philanthropy is providing access to the many and not to just the few. And so if you find people that align with that vision and align with that mission, they might use different ways, and they might be different ways, they might be interested in different things. But the most important thing is that they are trying to serve sort of the underserved. We've always seen people that are underserved as great people with great potential, not just that they are people who don't have, that they are great people with great potential. So they're not just passive recipients of something, they're participating in our program. So you have to see people at the end of the spectrum. These are not poor people or illiterate people or poor children. There's a child who's born in underserved circumstances, but the child can't be poor. They're rich with potential. They're rich with, they're amazing. They're like children born anywhere else, and all they need is just a little bit of support, not a little bit, just the support and resources around them. And through that, you are able to unlock that potential. And all we need to do is just create the right environment to nurture that potential. Thank you.
Zim gave me goosebumps there. I can see a lot of reactions coming through from the audience, from our program participants. I think another question that's coming, I'm not sure if, okay. The question here is, how well received is the digitalized textbook initiative in local schools or communities that are deeply impoverished? Please share any data you may have. And I think this will be the last question we are taking from the audience. Malcolm, can I please pass it to you? I think this is a question that's meant for you, please.
In our community of practice, zibuza.net, one of the things we enable is access to resources. And so we have organizations that contribute. To date, we've got over 3,000 resources, classroom lesson plans, classroom activities, textbooks, past exam papers and memos, worksheets, workbooks, posters, etc. Right? The sharing ratio is 1 to 7 of that. So for every one resource or textbooks that gets uploaded, it gets viewed or downloaded 7 times. And so I think in terms of kids who don't have access to paper-based textbooks, if they've got access to a device and they can download the textbook, then they've got that textbook. So certainly, I think digital makes a huge difference from a logistical perspective. It also saves costs, meaning we can maybe allocate that spend to teacher training, teacher development, etc. But at that same note, I also want to say that for me, it's not enough. I think with the tools like AI and what we can do around personalized learning and conversational bots, where a learner could be, have personalized pathways where they could have conversations with a bot that will then, support them. I think that's where we need to be going, as opposed to like the traditional concept of a textbook.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. I will give each speaker, starting with Crystal, 30 seconds to just give us some closing remarks, anything that you want to leave with our program participants and our audience that have joined us today. 30 seconds each, please. Crystal, Zimkhitha, and Malcolm will then wrap it up for us.
Thank you again so much for having me. I think something that's really sticking with me and want to stick with the young teachers in the audience as well is just the power of creating a community of people around you that are going to help you celebrate the highs of your educational process, and also be there to to reflect with you when you are having challenges, but are going to help you keep going. Just to remember to have that solid why as to why you're doing this every day.
Thank you, Crystal.
Yes.
Zim? Be that expert teacher, be that leader, be that social entrepreneur. We really, really need it. And have fun. Have fun.
Thank you. Thank you, Zim. Malcolm, one word from you, please.
I believe modern day heroes are teachers and entrepreneurs. And so, yeah, this is our purpose, this is our calling, and that's what we live for.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, panelists, for availing yourself, for sharing your time. We've learned some lessons, we've explored strategies, and we've looked at some of the innovative ways in which we can solve some of the most pressing challenges that we face in our country. Thank you so much for working with me, for respecting me. It's been an amazing time. My name is Boitumelo Diale, and I represent the Boitumelo Diale brand, and I am a JGF ambassador. Signing out.